I promise to pay when I grow up. Little girl asks Millionaire for milk. His response shocks all. It was the kind of evening that makes your bones ache. A bitter January wind cut through the streets of Cincinnati like broken glass. Outside, sleet tapped against the windows of a small 24-hour corner store on Maple and Ninth. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above half-stocked shelves. The few customers moved quietly wrapped in coats and exhaustion. Then something happened that made time slow down. A girl, 8 years old at most, stepped inside clutching a bundled-up baby in a threadbare blanket. Her sneakers were soaked, her jeans torn at the knees, and her small face was pinched from cold. She walked straight to the dairy case and picked up a gallon of milk with both hands, her arms trembling from the weight. Then she stepped to the counter, placed the jug carefully down, and said the words that stopped everyone. I promise to pay when I grow up. The cashier blinked confused. Honey, where's your mom? But before she could answer, a man in a dark wool coat who had just entered the store turned toward her. His name was Ethan Mercer, a 48-year-old tech entrepreneur, recently listed as one of the top 10 richest men in Ohio. He had come in for breath mints on his way home from a board meeting, but what he found was something else entirely. Ethan froze watching the scene unfold. The cashier shook her head, reaching for the phone. No money, no milk. You can't just come in here like this. The girl flinched and began backing away, tears starting to rise in her throat. The baby whimpered. That's when Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. She's not stealing. I've got this. The cashier looked at him with surprise. Mr. Mercer? I didn't realize. But Ethan didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the girl. What's your name? He asked gently. Lily, she whispered. And this is Ben. He's my brother. He's one. The baby coughed softly. The cold was starting to get to him. Where's your coat? Ethan asked. I gave it to Ben, she said simply. Ethan took a breath, calculating, but not in the way he once did for business. This was something else, urgent, raw, unplanned. We're buying more than just milk, he said. Stay close to me. He filled a basket formula diapers, peanut butter soup socks, wipes. Every item felt like a lifeline. As they checked out, Lily gently placed the milk on the counter with both hands like it was a treasure. Thank you, sir. But I really will pay you back. Someday. I promise. Ethan met her eyes. I don't doubt that for a second. As they stepped into the icy night, he asked, Where are you staying? Under the Monroe Bridge, she said, her voice barely audible. There's a pipe there that's dry. I keep Ben warm with newspapers. We stay real quiet. Ethan nodded slowly, his breath clouding the air. He had closed billion-dollar deals, but he had never felt the kind of weight that settled on him now. Not fear, not responsibility, something heavier. Something like purpose. The bridge loomed ahead like a giant rib cage, all concrete, and rust its underbelly hidden in shadows. Cars thundered overhead, their headlights flashing across the wet pavement. The Monroe Bridge wasn't just a shortcut across town. For some, like Lily and Ben, it was the only shelter between them and the rawness of the street. Ethan followed her closely, his shoes slipping slightly on the icy sidewalk. She led him behind a row of overflowing trash bins and broken shopping carts where the hum of the city dulled and the air took on the bitter scent of gasoline, damp cardboard, and despair. There, she whispered, pointing to a spot tucked behind a support column. Blankets had been laid out with meticulous care. A plastic tarp was pinned over a corner of the space to block the wind. Beside it, nestled under layers of old coats and crumpled newspaper, was a woman. Mom Lily called softly. The figure stirred. The woman sat up fast, her movements jerky, her eyes wide and unfocused. Her long hair was tangled, her face pale and drawn. She looked at Ethan like he was a threat. Who's he? She slurred. Lily crouched beside her. It's okay, Mom. He helped us. Ben was hungry. Ethan stayed back. I'm not with the city or the cops. I just saw her at the store. She asked for milk. The woman Maggie blinked slowly. Her fingers twitched like they weren't sure what to do. She reached for Ben as Lily gently handed him over. The baby cooed faintly, recognizing her warmth. You shouldn't have gone alone, Maggie muttered. I had to, Lily said. You were sleeping and Ben kept crying. Ethan looked at them, this fragile triangle of survival, and felt something crack inside. He cleared his throat. I'd like to help. No one helps for free, Maggie said bitterly. I'm not offering forever, he said. Just a safe place for the night. Maggie's eyes narrowed defensive. Her shoulders stiffened. Lily stood between them, looking up at her mother. He gave me his coat. He didn't yell or lie. Maybe just one night. Ethan stayed silent, letting the offer hang. Finally, Maggie looked away, defeated by cold and exhaustion. Just one night, she murmured. No questions, no strings. Agreed, Ethan said. The walk back to his car was slow. Maggie shuffled in borrowed boots 2 sizes too big. Ben was bundled in Ethan's coat pressed to Lily's chest. Once inside the heated SUV, Lily's eyes grew heavy, and for the first time that day, her shoulders slumped. Where are we going? Maggie asked, voice low. My place, Ethan replied. It's safe, warm, nothing fancy. That was a lie. Ethan Mercer's penthouse sat on the 30th floor of one of the most secure buildings in the city, with smart locks, motion sensors, and a view of the skyline that seemed a world away from a bridge and a plastic tarp. But as the elevator climbed and Maggie watched her reflection in the mirrored doors, she looked like someone arriving in a dream she didn't trust. And Lily, small, silent Lily, held Ben tighter, her eyes darting between her mother and Ethan, unsure what would happen next. The doors opened with a soft chime. Inside was light, warmth, clean air, hardwood floors, and the faint scent of cedar and lemon. Lily froze at the entrance. Is this your house? She asked, barely above a whisper. For now, Ethan said. It's yours too, just for tonight. He showed them to the guest room. Plush blankets, a full bed, a small crib his assistant had delivered hours earlier. Ben stirred and sighed when he touched the mattress. Maggie stood in the doorway, unmoving. I don't know how to do this, she said. Being helped, not running. You don't have to know, Ethan replied. Just sleep. That night, Ethan stood by the window of his penthouse, watching the city glitter like spilled stars. Behind him in the guest room, a child finally slept under a roof. Not out of fear, but out of peace. And a man who had spent his life building walls of steel and strategy realized that the most valuable thing he had wasn't his empire. It was being needed. Morning came with a sky smeared in gray and the distant sound of early traffic rising from the city below. Ethan hadn't slept. He'd sat most of the night in a leather armchair near the window, listening for sounds from the guest room. Footsteps, crying something. But there had been only silence. Peaceful, tentative silence. By 7 a.m., he was already dressed, a grocery bag in one hand and a new coat for Lily tucked under his arm. He stepped out of the elevator on the penthouse floor and turned the corner toward his guest room, but stopped short. The door was open. The bed was made. The comforter smoothed out with careful, almost military precision. A folded towel sat at the foot. The crib was empty. The room was empty. They were gone. He blinked, set the groceries on the table, checked the bathroom. Nothing. Closet, bare, windows locked. His stomach turned. Ethan rushed downstairs to the building's front desk. Did the woman from 3003 check out this morning? He asked, trying to mask the urgency in his voice. The young woman behind the desk looked up from her monitor. Yes, sir. Around 6 a.m., she left the key card and said they wouldn't be staying after all. Didn't ask for anything. Just walked out. No goodbyes, no thank you. Just vanished. Ethan's heart sank. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Laura canceled my meetings today. All of them, sir. Yes, I'm not coming in. The search began immediately. Ethan drove the streets himself. Neighborhoods near Monroe Bridge, alleyways behind shelters, public libraries, old bus depots. At a soup kitchen on 11th Street, someone said they might have seen a woman and a girl matching that description earlier that morning. But no one was certain. By sundown, he was back at the bridge. The spot behind the column was abandoned. The plastic tarp was gone. The blankets, the old shopping cart, all vanished like vapor. Just damp concrete now, and silence. Ethan sat on the curb, the streetlights flickering on above him. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small drawing, a napkin sketch Lily had given him before bed. 3 stick figures, a man, a girl, and a baby. Above them, the word home written in pencil. The napkin was slightly wrinkled but dry. He had kept it in his pocket all day. As the wind picked up, he whispered to the empty street, "Where did you go, Lily?" There was no answer. But he wasn't giving up. Not now, not after what he'd seen. Not after what they had shared in a single night of warmth, hope, and something like family. He stood and walked slowly back to his car, the sketch still in his hand, like a promise he hadn't yet fulfilled. It was nearly dark when Ethan turned onto the cracked pavement leading to Fernhill Park, a forgotten corner of the city that most people avoided after sundown. Street lamps flickered with half-hearted effort, casting long shadows over rusted playground equipment and graffiti-stained benches. He'd checked 3 shelters and 2 food pantries already. Nothing. But a tip from a woman at a community center on 14th had given him one last thread to follow. A little girl with a baby. I think she was headed toward the park near the hedge line on the east end. Said she was waiting for her mama. Ethan parked on the street and stepped into the cold evening air. His boots crunched over frostbitten grass. The park was nearly empty, just a few bundled-up figures hurrying home before dark. Then he heard it. A hum, soft, fragile, almost swallowed by the wind. He turned toward a low hedge and saw a figure small and curled in the shadows. Lily. She was sitting cross-legged on the frozen ground, rocking baby Ben gently in her lap. She was humming something low and sweet, something that didn't quite have words, but carried the weight of lullabies and long nights. Lily, Ethan called quietly. She froze, then turned. Her eyes lit up. "Mr. Mercer?" She breathed, her voice cracked and dry. He approached slowly. "I've been looking for you. I told Mom you'd come," she whispered. "But she didn't believe me. Where is she?" Lily looked down at Ben. "She left this morning. Said she was going to find medicine. He had a cough. She told me to stay here and wait, but she hasn't come back." Ethan crouched beside her, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the cracked lips, the way she held her brother like a shield. "How long have you been waiting?" he asked. She shrugged. "Since the sun was up." Ethan's heart sank. "You're not staying here tonight. But what if she comes back? We'll leave a note. We'll tell her where you are. But you and Ben need warmth, safety, food." Lily looked down at her brother, then slowly nodded. Ethan reached out. "Let me carry him." Carefully, Lily passed Ben over. The baby was warm only because Lily had been holding him so close, her own coat open around them both. His little fingers clutched a corner of Ethan's scarf, as if he knew the change meant comfort. Ethan wrapped him tighter in his arms and stood. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of the cold." This time, he didn't take them to a motel. He took them home. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Lily stood beside him, smaller than ever, in his oversized coat. She glanced around the sleek interior of the car, but didn't say a word. When the doors opened and they stepped inside, she paused at the threshold. "You live here," she whispered. "Yes," Ethan said. "And for now, so do you." She didn't move. "You don't have to be afraid," he added gently. "I'm not," she said. "It's just, this place doesn't smell like mold or cold. It smells like lemon, like a candle we used to have. Before." Ethan nodded, throat tight. "Then it's time to light that candle again." He helped her settle Ben onto the couch, pulling a soft throw blanket over him. Then he turned to Lily. "You want cocoa?" Her eyes brightened faintly. "With marshmallows." "I think I can manage that." While he warmed the milk, Lily stood at the window, her fingers pressed to the glass. Below them, the city glittered like spilled jewels, distant and indifferent. But here in this room, something had changed. A child who had been waiting all day in the cold was now warm-fed and safe. And a man who had built his life on profit margins and acquisitions was beginning to understand what it meant to show up. Not for a deal, but for someone who had no one else. The next morning, the skyline was hidden behind a veil of icy fog. Ethan stood in his kitchen pouring coffee with one hand and checking his phone with the other. Still no word, no missed calls, no messages. He glanced toward the hallway where Lily sat, curled under a fleece blanket on the couch, flipping through a coloring book he'd found in a storage closet. Ben was asleep in the guest room crib, finally warm and fed. But Maggie, Lily's mother, was still missing. Ethan set down his mug and pulled out his phone. Then, almost without thinking, he tapped a number he hadn't used in months. "Mike Sanderson," the voice on the line said, groggy but alert. "Mike, it's Ethan." There was a pause. "You calling me before sunrise? Must be serious. I need your help. A woman's missing, mid-30s, thin, dark blonde hair. Last seen near Fernhill Park. Mental health. Might be a factor. Tell me everything Mike said." By noon, Mike had his team on the ground. Discreet, quiet, and fast. They checked nearby pharmacies, clinics, and public transportation logs. 2 hours later, Ethan's phone buzzed. "We might have something." Maggie had been spotted near an abandoned urgent care center on Elm and Delaney, disoriented, asking for baby aspirin. When police arrived to perform a wellness check, she was gone. By mid-afternoon, another tip came in. A woman matching her description seen behind a church where gospel music often played through the open windows on Sundays. A spot Lily had mentioned in passing. Ethan drove there himself and found her. She was crouched against the side of the old brick church, knees drawn to her chest coat, missing arms wrapped tightly around herself. A broken baby bottle lay beside her. She didn't look up when he approached. "Maggie?" She flinched. He crouched slowly. "It's me, Ethan Mercer. Lily and Ben are safe. They're with me." Her eyes fluttered open. Recognition flickered. Then shame. "I didn't mean to leave her," she whispered. He had a cough. "I thought I could find something. I got lost. In my head. The buzzing comes back sometimes." "I know," Ethan said gently. "You were trying. I didn't think you'd still be looking. I promised Lily I would." Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" Ethan exhaled. "Because I can, and because Lily trusted me, and I trust her." Maggie turned her head away. "I'm not good at this. Being a mother." "You're here, aren't you?" he said. "You came looking for medicine. You're still trying. That's more than most." A soft voice cut through the air. "Mom?" They both turned. Lily stood beside the church gate, her coat zipped to her chin, Ben in a sling across her chest. Maggie's eyes widened. How?" "I told Mr. Mercer you'd come back," Lily said quietly. "He believed me." Maggie rose slowly, unsure, like the ground might shift beneath her. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to scare you." "I know," Lily whispered, "but I didn't want to go back under the bridge. Not again." Maggie looked down at her daughter, then at Ethan. "What happens now?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. "Now, we go home." That night, as the elevator rose to the penthouse, Maggie clutched Ben like a second heartbeat. Her eyes darted around the hallway. Lily walked beside Ethan, holding his hand. Inside, Maggie didn't speak for a long time. She wandered the living room like someone walking through a memory. Cautious, slow, untrusting. Ethan set a small duffel on the kitchen counter. "There's shampoo, toothbrushes, diapers, whatever you need." She nodded but didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. Later, as Lily carefully tucked Ben into the crib, Maggie watched from the doorway. "She's different already," she said softly. "She feels safe," Ethan replied. Maggie looked at him. "Don't get too close." He raised an eyebrow. "To you. To us. People like you. You think you're helping, but this life, it's a sinking ship. I'm not here to rescue anyone," Ethan said. "Then what are you here for?" He looked toward Lily's room, then back to her. "To walk beside you, for as long as you'll let me." Maggie didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. The days that followed felt like borrowed time, delicate, uncertain, but real. The kind of time you don't trust right away because your heart still braces for it to disappear. Ethan adjusted quickly to having people in his home, though he rarely admitted it out loud. He started keeping extra juice boxes in the fridge and stocked the cupboards with snack packs of crackers and instant oatmeal. He even bought a toy box, awkwardly choosing its contents based on Amazon reviews and what normal kids might like. Lily, for her part, remained quiet but curious. She began exploring the apartment in quiet bursts, peeking into hallways, inspecting Ethan's shelves, and cautiously running her fingers across picture frames. When she came across one of Ethan and a smiling woman with kind eyes, she asked, "Is this your wife?" "She was," Ethan said. "Her name was Emily. She passed away a few years ago." "I'm sorry." "Me too," he replied. Maggie, meanwhile, stayed cautious. She spent most of her time in the guest room, or curled on the couch, always with one hand resting protectively on Ben. She still jumped at unexpected noises. She still checked the locks. But she also started to breathe deeper, to stand taller. One afternoon, Ethan found Lily at the dining table, her tongue poking out slightly as she scribbled on a napkin with one of his office pens. When he approached, she held it up shyly. It was a drawing, a tall man holding hands with a small girl and a baby between them. Above the stick figures was a single word written in shaky block letters: trying. Ethan smiled and something shifted inside him. "That's pretty good," he said. "I draw when I'm scared," Lily replied. "It helps." He carefully folded the napkin and slipped it into his wallet. "Then keep drawing." By the end of the week, the apartment felt different, lived in. There were crayons under the couch, crumbs on the coffee table, and baby wipes in every room. Ethan caught himself smiling at the chaos. Maggie even began helping with dinner. Nothing extravagant, grilled cheese, scrambled eggs, soup from a can. But there was something comforting about the three of them sitting at the table. For Lily, it was a revelation. "We haven't eaten at a table since Grandma's house," she said one night, dipping her sandwich in tomato soup. "I burn toast half the time," Ethan said, grinning. "It's pretty deciduous. That's okay," she replied. "You're learning?" It was a strange new normal, stitched together by small moments. Maggie brushing Lily's hair, Ethan reading bedtime stories, Lily showing Ben how to kick his feet on the playmat. For the first time in a long time, they weren't just surviving. They were trying, but not everything was light and laughter. Maggie still woke in the middle of the night, panicked by bad dreams. Lily sometimes stood at the window too long, watching the street below, with a faraway look. And Ethan, for all his effort, struggled with how much to give without making it feel like pity. One evening, as they sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, Maggie turned to him. "You know, this isn't forever, right?" Ethan nodded. "I know. I don't want Lily thinking someone like you is always going to show up and fix things." She doesn't think that, he said softly. She knows she's fixing herself. Maggie looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can be the kind of mom she needs." Ethan paused before answering. "You already are. You just haven't said it out loud yet." Maggie didn't reply, but she didn't argue either. That night, Lily handed Ethan another napkin before bed. This one had 4 stick figures: a man, a woman, a girl, and a baby, all standing beneath a house. The word trying was still there, but now it was bigger. When she went to brush her teeth, Maggie watched from the hallway. "She feels safe," Ethan said. Maggie crossed her arms. "I want to be the kind of mother she remembers with pride, not just someone who got her through." "You already are," he said. She glanced at him, her voice cautious. "I still don't know if I can trust this." "Trust you? I don't expect you to," he said. "But I'll keep showing up anyway." That was the deal they never said out loud. No promises, no guarantees, just trying one day at a time. And somehow, that was enough. It began with a knock, a simple casual knock on the building's main lobby door. Polite, unremarkable, but it would unravel the fragile peace they had built, like loose threads pulled from an old sweater. Ethan had just stepped out of the shower when his phone buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Mercer, there's a man downstairs asking for a woman named Maggie. He says he's her husband." Ethan's blood went cold. "Hold him there," he said. "I'll be right down." He didn't bother with a tie, just pulled on a hoodie, and Jeans grabbed his key card and took the express elevator. His heart pounded the entire way. When the door slid open in the lobby, Ethan spotted him immediately. Leaning against the concierge desk, hands in the pocket of a worn jacket, stood a tall man with close-cropped hair and a crooked smile that never quite reached his eyes. Derek. Ethan knew it instinctively. The man looked him up and down. "You must be the one playing house with my family." Ethan stepped forward, keeping his voice measured. "You need to leave." Derek laughed, bitter and sharp. "I just want to talk to Maggie. And see my boy. That's not too much to ask, is it?" "You abandoned them. You threatened them. You have no right." "I have a son," Derek said, stepping closer. "That gives me rights." Ethan didn't flinch. "You gave up those rights the moment you laid a hand on her." 2 building security guards were now hovering nearby, alert and tense. Derek glanced at them, then smirked. "You think money makes you brave?" "No," Ethan replied coolly. "But it makes me hard to ignore. And I'll use every cent I have to make sure you never get near them again." For a long second, neither man moved. Then Derek shrugged. "Tell her I came by." "She won't care." With that, Derek turned and strolled out the front doors into the gray afternoon. Upstairs, Ethan found Maggie sitting on the couch, bouncing Ben on her knee. Lily was coloring at the kitchen table. He tried to compose himself as he entered. "What's wrong?" Maggie asked immediately. He came. Her face went white. "Lily?" She never saw him. "She's fine. You're both safe." Maggie's voice cracked. "He always does this." Disappears for years, then shows up like a ghost. He's gone now, Ethan said. And next time, the police will be waiting. But Maggie couldn't stop shaking. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, she stood by the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. "I don't know how to live like this," she whispered. "Always afraid, always looking over my shoulder." "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said gently. "But what if he finds us again? What if he takes Lily or Ben? Then he'll have to go through me." She looked at him, tired and hollow. "You didn't sign up for this. I didn't have to. I chose to." Maggie sat down slowly on the couch. Her hands trembled as she held her mug of tea. "You don't know what kind of man he is. You don't know what he's capable of." "No," Ethan admitted, "but I know what you're capable of." She blinked. "What do you mean? You left. You protected your children. You got them out. That's strength." "I don't feel strong." "Then let me feel it for you until you do." The next morning, Ethan called Mike Sanderson again. "Time to make this official," he said. "We need to file a restraining order. Today." Mike was already on it. That afternoon, Maggie and Mike went down to the precinct to fill out the paperwork. Ethan stayed behind with the kids, building pillow forts and reading Lily's favorite dog-eared picture book for the third time. But all the while, one thought circled his mind like a hawk. Derek wasn't done. This was a man who didn't care about the law, who didn't take no for an answer. And the thought of him lurking, waiting, planning, it made Ethan's skin crawl. So he took action. Security systems were upgraded, cameras added, access codes changed. He made sure Maggie and the kids were never alone. But he also knew they couldn't live this way forever. So he began looking, quietly, for somewhere safer. Somewhere no one knew their names. Because love wasn't just comfort and cocoa. Sometimes it was protection. The plan was simple: get and confront the past and walk out stronger. But nothing about facing a man like Derek was ever simple. It was Maggie's idea. After filing the restraining order, after Ethan did everything he could to lock down the penthouse and keep them safe, Maggie said something that stopped him in his tracks. "I need to look him in the eye." Ethan blinked. "That's not necessary. We can keep you out of it." "No," she said firmly. "It is necessary. Not for him, for me. I want him to hear it, that I'm not afraid anymore." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct in him said, protect her, shield her, hide her from the storm. But then he saw something in her eyes. Steel, not fear. So he made the call. Mike arranged it. Derek had been poking around shelters, flashing Maggie's name, making veiled threats. He slipped up, tried to use one of Maggie's old IDs at a check-cashing place. The cops had him on surveillance. It was enough for a warrant. The sting would happen that Thursday night. The location, a pool hall on the east side. Derek had a habit of hustling there. Loud, dim, forgettable. A place where a man like him could disappear between beers and trouble. Ethan drove Maggie to a safe distance in an unmarked SUV. Mike sat behind the wheel, police comms crackling softly from the dash. They parked a block away, tension thick as frost on the windows. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Ethan asked quietly. Maggie stared ahead, unblinking. "No, but I need to." A few minutes later, Mike gave the signal. "He's out front, smoking." Maggie exhaled slowly. "Let's go." The arrest was fast and clean. Uniforms surrounded Derek in seconds. He barely had time to flick his cigarette before they slammed him onto the hood of a cruiser, cuffing him as he spewed curses and threats. Ethan held Maggie back until Derek looked up and saw her. His face twisted into a sneer. "You lying..." Maggie stepped forward, her voice cutting clean through the shouting. "You don't scare me anymore." He tried to lunge, but the officers shoved him back. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. Maggie didn't flinch. "You'll never touch my children again," she said, her voice steady. "You'll never take another breath from my life. This ends here." Derek's expression collapsed into rage, but he was silenced by steel cuffs and shouted commands. Mike led Maggie away from the scene, back toward the SUV. Ethan opened the door for her and followed her inside. They didn't speak right away, just sat in the dark vehicle, the city glowing faintly around them. "That was brave," Ethan finally said. Maggie shook her head. "That was necessary." Back at the penthouse, Lily was asleep, curled in a blanket fort under the coffee table. Ben was in his crib thumb, in mouth sleeping soundly. The babysitter, a retired kindergarten teacher named Mrs. Lane, gave them a warm smile as they came in. "No trouble," she whispered. They were angels. After she left, Ethan and Maggie lingered by the window. The city looked different now. Not safer, not brighter, but quieter somehow. Like something had finally been put to rest. "I always thought I'd have to run forever," Maggie said, voice soft. "You don't," Ethan replied. "Not anymore." She looked at him. "You stayed through all of this, even when it got ugly, even when I warned you." "I know." "Why?" He hesitated, searching for words that didn't sound like pity or saviorhood. "Because somewhere between buying milk and building pillow forts I started caring," he said. "And not just about the kids, about you." She exhaled. "You're not what I expected." He gave a half smile. "Neither are you." They stood there a moment longer, not touching, not speaking, just two people who had seen each other at their worst and stayed. And that night, for the first time in years, Maggie slept without waking up in a cold sweat. Because the man who haunted her was behind bars. Because her voice had echoed louder than his. Because she had faced the storm and walked out of it standing tall. The morning air in Pasadena was crisp and still a far cry from the cold metal scent of the city. The sky was painted in soft pastels, streaks of coral and lavender, stretching over rows of modest homes, with sun-dappled porches and overgrown gardens. A bird chirped lazily from a nearby tree as Ethan pulled the SUV to the curb and cut the engine. "This is it," he said, turning to Maggie. "Safe house, fully furnished, quiet neighborhood, 6-month lease paid up front." Maggie stared out the passenger window unmoving. Lily, sitting in the back seat with Ben, nestled in a car seat beside her, leaned forward. "It has a porch." "Mom?" With real steps, Maggie exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around her seatbelt. "It's just a lot. You don't have to stay," Ethan said gently. "But it's yours if you want it." She nodded once. "Let's see it." The house was small, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a cozy living room. But it was clean and warm, with sunlight streaming through the blinds and the faint smell of fresh paint and floor polish. Ethan carried Ben inside, while Lily darted through the rooms, marveling at closets, windows, and even the dusty attic pull-down. Maggie walked the perimeter of the living room in slow, deliberate steps, her hand brushing against the arm of the couch, the edge of the dining table. She wasn't just looking at furniture, she was searching for something invisible safety. She paused at the hallway doorway. "You bought this?" she asked, turning back to Ethan. "Technically, the lease is in your name." Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You're giving it to me." "I'm not giving you charity," he said. "I'm giving you a foundation." Maggie's jaw worked, but no sound came. Then finally she asked, "Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because you deserve more than survival. You deserve a shot." Maggie looked away, blinking hard. "No one's ever said that to me. Not and meant it." "Then I'm honored to be the first." The next few days passed in a blur of settling in. Ethan stayed for a few nights sleeping on the couch. He helped install child locks on the kitchen drawers and fixed a crooked step on the porch. Maggie planted 3 small herb pots in the kitchen window, though she admitted she had no idea how to keep basil alive. Lily organized her few books in a neat row under her bed, alphabetized by title. Ben, unfazed by the change, cooed happily, as long as someone fed him and kept him warm. On the 3rd night, Maggie stood on the porch while Ethan repaired the screen door. "I thought leaving him, Derek, would be the end of the nightmare," she said quietly. "But it was just the beginning. I didn't know it would follow me for years." Ethan didn't respond right away. He screwed the last hinge into place and stood beside her. "You're not alone now. That makes a difference." She nodded. "You ever regret it, taking us in?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Never. Even now, especially now." Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes. "You saved us." He shook his head. "No, I just gave you a place to land. You're the one who learned how to fly." The next morning, Lily raced into the living room, holding a piece of paper with glitter stuck to her fingers. "I made something," she said proudly, holding it out to Maggie. It was a certificate of bravery complete with sparkly stars and crooked handwriting. At the bottom, it read, "For my mom, the bravest girl in the world." Maggie knelt down and wrapped her daughter in a fierce hug. Ethan stepped back, giving them space, but his chest tightened as he watched them. This wasn't the end of a journey. It was the beginning. A house wasn't a home because of bricks or walls. It was because of moments like this. Healing, loving, rebuilding, and somewhere deep in his heart, Ethan knew that this house wasn't just for them. It was for him too. Because in giving them a place to rest, he had found something he hadn't even realized he was missing: purpose. A week after settling into the Pasadena house, the mailbox brought something Maggie hadn't expected. Tucked between grocery store flyers and a neighborhood newsletter was a plain white envelope. No return address. Just her name, Maggie Jensen, written in tight, familiar handwriting. She stood in the kitchen staring at it while Ben babbled in his high chair and Lily colored at the table, humming softly. Ethan stepped in through the back door holding a brown paper bag of groceries. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her expression. She handed him the envelope. "It's from my mother." Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he said nothing. "I haven't heard from her in over a decade," Maggie whispered. "Last thing she ever said to me was that I'd ruined everything, that I deserved what I got." Ethan's voice was soft. "You don't have to open it." "I know," she said, "but I think I want to." That night after the kids were asleep, Maggie sat on the porch with a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The sky was clear. A few stars blinked overhead, faint but steady. She opened the envelope. The letter was written in blue ink on lined paper, the kind that came from the dollar store, the kind they used to keep by the kitchen phone. "Dear Maggie, if you're reading this, it means the address I found actually reached you. I don't know if you'll ever write back. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything, for the shouting, for the silence, for turning my back when you needed a hand. I think about you every night. I wonder if you're alive, if you're safe, if you're still mad. I hope not. But I wouldn't blame you if you were. If you've made a life, I hope it's a good one. I hope you're warm. I hope someone loves you the way I should have. Love always, Mom." Maggie stared at the letter, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan stepped outside a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Did you read it?" he asked gently. She nodded, eyes still on the paper. She said she's sorry, that she hopes I'm warm. He passed her a mug. "Are you—" Maggie looked toward the glowing windows behind them, where Lily's books were neatly lined up under her bed, and Ben's sleepy gurgles could still be heard through the baby monitor. "Yeah," she said, "for the first time, I think I am." Later that week, another message arrived, this time via email from the community center. It was an invitation. "We're hosting a community panel on rebuilding after trauma. We'd love for you to speak." Maggie nearly deleted it. "Me," she said aloud in disbelief. "I'm not a speaker. I can barely tell my story without falling apart." Ethan, who was feeding Ben mashed bananas in the kitchen, looked up. "Then tell it messy," he said. "Tell it the way it really happened." Maggie let the idea simmer. That night, while Lily slept and Ben dreamt in his crib, she sat down at the dining table and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote, "What I know now." And then, without a plan or a filter, she started writing. The morning of the panel came fast. It was held in the auditorium of the local high school. Nothing fancy, but the folding chairs were packed. Maggie sat backstage with 3 other women, a domestic violence counselor, a young mom who'd aged out of foster care, and a former addict who now ran a shelter. When her name was called, Maggie stepped up to the microphone with her hands shaking and her stomach clenched. But then she saw Lily sitting in the front row, Ethan beside her, both of them smiling. And she began, "I used to think that surviving was enough, that waking up every day and not falling apart meant I was doing okay. But then I had my daughter, and suddenly surviving wasn't enough anymore. She needed more. She deserved more." The room was silent, some eyes welled with tears, some heads nodded slowly. Maggie kept going. She told them about the bridge, the milk, the knock on the door, the man who didn't walk away, the terror, the safety, the trying. And when she ended with, "I begged for milk and found a miracle," there was a long beat of silence. Then applause. Afterward, as people lined up to thank her, a woman in her 60s took Maggie's hand. "I don't know you," she whispered, "but I feel like I do. Your story. It was mine once. And now I think I'm finally ready to tell it." Maggie hugged her. No words needed. Back at the house that night, Lily handed her a drawing, a paper crown made of folded flyers. "You're the queen of brave," she declared. Maggie laughed through tears and knelt down. "Then what are you?" Lily grinned. "I'm the author." And just like that, Maggie knew. This wasn't about retelling the past anymore. It was about writing the future. The house had begun to settle into a rhythm soft and steady like a heartbeat, finally finding its pace. Mornings started with scrambled eggs or over-toasted bagels, depending on whose turn it was in the kitchen. Lily brushed her teeth with sleepy grumbles and helped Maggie pack a diaper bag for Ben, before Ethan arrived, always with a fresh bag of groceries and something warm from the bakery around the corner. But something inside Maggie had changed. She no longer flinched when the phone rang. She didn't triple-check the locks before bed, and sometimes she caught herself humming again. Real melodies, not the ones stitched together from fear and survival. She was no longer just getting through the day. She was beginning to live, and so she kept writing. After the panel, women from all over the city began reaching out. A small group formed through the community center, and Maggie offered to meet with them once a week in a quiet back room lined with folding chairs and bulletin boards full of flyers. The program didn't have a name at first. It was just Wednesday Group. But then after one particularly moving session, where every woman in the room shared a single memory that had once made them feel invisible, Maggie stood at the front of the circle and said, "We're still standing, all of us. That matters." And the name stuck. Still Standing, a writing circle for women reclaiming their voices. Each week more people showed up, some trembling, some angry, some silent. Maggie never pushed anyone to speak. She simply asked one question to start. What's the first time you realized you were more than what happened to you? Some answered with poetry, some answered with tears. But all of them answered, and Maggie always went last. One day she read, "I begged for milk and found a miracle. I thought I was falling apart, but it was the beginning of becoming whole." That line became the unofficial heartbeat of the group. Back home, the energy was different. Lily had made her own letterbox out of a shoebox and decorated it with puffy stickers and glitter glue. On the lid, she wrote, "My big brave feelings." Maggie smiled when she found Lily's first letter inside. "Dear future me, don't be afraid to be loud. Don't let anyone tell you you're too much. Remember, you come from strong people, and soup always helps. Love, Lily." Maggie cried when she read it. Not out of sadness, but because her daughter didn't just feel safe. She felt heard. And now, Maggie wanted that for every woman who had ever slept under a bridge. Every girl who had ever whispered instead of shouted. Every mother who thought her brokenness meant she didn't deserve joy. One rainy afternoon, Maggie sat at her writing desk in the small spare room Ethan had helped her paint a cheerful robin's egg blue. The walls held framed artwork Lily had drawn, and a donated typewriter from a community member sat like a proud relic in the corner. She opened her journal and began writing something different. Not a memory, not a speech, but a book. The first line came slowly but clearly. "I was invisible before I became a mother. Then I realized I'd been seen all along, just by the wrong people." She wrote until her hand cramped and the baby monitor lit up with Ben's sleepy fussing. She kissed his forehead, rocked him gently, and whispered, "Almost done, buddy. Mama's writing us out of the dark." That evening after dinner, Ethan handed her a manila envelope. "What's this?" Maggie asked, wiping Ben's chin with a burp cloth. "Something to consider." Inside were printouts, applications for small publishing grants, workshop proposals, and local speaking opportunities. At the bottom, a single note in Ethan's handwriting. "You're already doing the work. Let the world hear you." Maggie looked up at him, stunned. "You think this matters?" "I know it does," Ethan said, "because you're not just surviving anymore. You're changing lives." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You changed mine. I just gave you a place to land," he said. "You're the one who built the runway." They stood there quietly, the air between them filled with something fragile and sacred. Not romance. Not yet. But respect. And something else. A future. The reading night at the community center was supposed to be small. Maybe a dozen chairs, a thermos of coffee, and a folding table with store-bought cookies. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet celebration to honor the stories that had been poured out onto paper by women who once believed they had no voice. But word had spread. By the time Maggie arrived that evening, the room was glowing with string lights draped along the walls, and every folding chair was filled. Neighbors, counselors, students, survivors. People who'd heard whispers about this woman, who turned her pain into pages and encouraged others to do the same. Ethan was there too, holding Ben in one arm and a tray of homemade muffins in the other, Lily trailing behind him with a hand-lettered sign that read, "Still Standing, Voices That Matter." Maggie stood at the back of the room for a moment, overwhelmed. She never expected any of this. Not the full room, not the warmth, not the hope. The host tapped the mic. Welcome, everyone. Tonight is not about perfection. It's about power. It's about truth. And it starts with a woman who turned her story into a light for others. Please welcome Maggie Jensen. Applause erupted warm and sincere. Maggie stepped to the mic, heart pounding. She took a breath and opened her journal. I used to think my story ended the day I left him. But I was wrong. That was just the prologue. The room quieted to stillness. I begged for milk, she continued, and found a miracle. A stranger who didn't turn away. A child who refused to stop hoping. A second chance I never believed I deserved. And now, I share this not as someone who was rescued, but as someone who decided to fight, to write, to stand. Her voice wavered only once. When she looked up and saw Lily beaming from the front row, the paper crown still tucked behind her headband. I thought I was falling apart, Maggie finished. But it turns out I was becoming whole. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was lasting. The kind that seeps into your bones. One by one, the other women from her writing circle stepped up to read their letters. Some were shy, some defiant, some trembling. But all of them spoke with strength. They spoke with Maggie's fire. When it ended, an older woman with silver hair and a cane approached her quietly. I've never told anyone my story, she said. Until tonight, I didn't think it mattered. Maggie squeezed her hand. It matters. You matter. That night back at home, Lily brought Maggie a new letter from her box. Can I read it to you? She asked. Maggie nodded, sitting beside her on the bed. Dear future me, even when things get hard, remember you come from a long line of brave women. Remember that telling the truth doesn't make you weak. It makes you shine. Love, Lily. Maggie kissed the top of her daughter's head. You already shine, sweetheart. From the hallway, Ethan watched the moment quietly. The hallway light flickered above him. Not a flaw, just a reminder that life didn't have to be perfect to be good. Later, when the kids were asleep and the house was filled with the soft sounds of nighttime, the creak of the heater, the slow turning of pages, Maggie sat at her desk and opened her manuscript. The final page was blank. Until now, she picked up her pen and wrote, "This is not a story about rescue. This is a story about choosing to live, even when life gives you every reason not to. And if you're reading this, you've already started." She closed the notebook. Outside, a breeze rustled the rose bushes in the yard. Inside, a woman sat in her writing room, surrounded by silence that was no longer empty, but full of beginnings. The days that followed the reading were soft and golden, like the first warmth of spring after a long and bitter winter. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Ben still woke up at 3 a.m., Lily still got stubborn during math homework, and Maggie still had moments where shadows tried to reclaim their old corners in her mind. But something had shifted. It was in the way Maggie spoke without shrinking. The way she walked into the community center now, not as a guest, but as a leader. The way she held the pen when she wrote, steady not trembling. She had gone from asking for safety to building it, for herself, for others. Ethan still showed up every morning, always pretending he was just in the neighborhood, though everyone knew better. He wasn't just part of their story now, he was family. One evening as they sat on the porch, Lily asleep, Ben rocking softly in his bassinet, Maggie turned to him and said, "You know, it's strange." "What?" as he asked. How something that began with a gallon of milk turned into this. Ethan smiled. Kinda makes you believe in small miracles. She looked at him, her voice soft but sure. "No. It makes me believe in people." They didn't need to say more. Because some stories don't end with a twist or a tragedy. They end with truth. With healing. With a woman who once whispered her story, now shouting it from a stage. And a girl who once promised to pay for milk, now writing stories of her own. And a man who thought he had everything, until he gave something away, and realized that's when his life truly began. Because the greatest stories are the ones we live together.